So last October, I was able to find business class award availability for ANA and got to experience their 787 business class round trip from San Francisco to Tokyo. So in this video, I'm going to talk through the flight experience as well as how much I paid for it. So let's get into it. So a little bit of context, Victor and I flew to Japan early October last year before Japan officially opened for tourism. And the only reason we were able to do that was because we were actually going there for a friend's wedding. And there was a super annoying process where we had to apply for a special visa. And then, of course, about a week before our trip, Japan announced that they were officially reopening. No complaints though, because at least for the first 4 to 5 days of our trip, we basically got to experience Japan without any tourists really. So the lines weren't long, attractions weren't crowded. It was great. And I think this is also why we were able to snag a pretty last minute award availability for ANA. But I will get into that towards the end of the video. But in the meantime, let's take a look at what the flight itself was like. So again, we flew out of San Francisco, and this was on ANA 787 business class, which is not the room, which is their newer business class product. So just keep that in mind. This was a slightly older business class product, and we flew from SFO to Narita Airport in Tokyo, and the total flight time going there was around 11 hours. When you first get to your seat, you'll find an amenity kit, headphones, blankets, a pillow, pretty much all your usual business class stuff. They also come around with champagne, which we definitely took advantage of. The amenity kits were super cute. I was actually really excited to see Shiro products inside since I've heard really good things about the brand. Was especially excited about this yuzu lip balm, but mine for some reason was basically all dried up. There was no hint of yuzu whatsoever, so it might have been a dud, but that was definitely a little bit disappointing. But anyway, the seat itself is very spacious. I love the extra compartment underneath here so you can store shoes, bags, whatever without it touching the ground. The real test for our business class flights is usually seeing whether or not Victor can actually fit in the seat. So for reference, he's about 6'5", 6'6", and unfortunately has not had the best luck when it comes to fitting in lie flat seats. ANA sadly was no exception, and he couldn't fit lying completely flat, so he had to sleep with the seat slightly angled so his legs had a bit more room. But of course, it's still a game changer over the space he gets when we normally fly economy. So if you're not ridiculously tall, you'll find that these seats have plenty of room, and they're actually quite comfy. So shortly after we boarded, they began to serve the first meal. This was the menu on our flight, at least for the Japanese option, which I always would recommend over the Western option, at least for your first experience. I think coming back after a week of, really good Japanese food, the Japanese option on the ANA business class flight didn't quite hit the spot, but I think in general, I find that the selection is usually better than the international or Western cuisine option. So they started us off with, it was edamame and 3 kinds of marinated mushrooms. This was great. And then the second course consisted of all these tasty goodies. The seafood was very fresh, and all of it had so much good flavor. And then for the main course, we got the simmered mackerel with ginger sauce, and it came with miso soup, steamed rice, and pickled veggies on the side. This was really good as well. The rice, I was surprised by how soft and fluffy it was, and the fish was also delicious. After the meal, they came around with dessert, which in this case was Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream, and I thought that was the perfect way to end the meal. Afterwards, less than 30 minutes later, I started making my way through their light dishes anytime menu. I'm always torn when I fly business class because, yes, I want to make use of the lie flat seat so I can get some quality rest, but there's also only so much time that you have to enjoy the food, So in this case, I decided to prioritize food first since I still had some stomach room after the first meal. But just look at this menu. I was most excited to try the rice bowl with ginger fried pork, both soups, and also their ippudo ramen. I actually started with the ramen, and this was not as good as I hoped it would be. It was very, very rich, a little bit too salty, and just overall not that great. Noodle quality was good, but I wouldn't recommend it, nor do I think I would get it again. But the portions were pretty good. And then after that, Victor went ahead and ordered the pork rice bowl, which I had a little bit of just to try. And I personally thought the pork was a little bit too fatty, but the sauce mixed with the vegetables and the rice, that was fantastic. So I would definitely recommend getting that over the ramen for sure. And then after that, I knocked out for a bit and then woke up a few hours later to try both of the soups. I started off with the corn soup, which was really good, and then went straight for the vegetable soup afterwards, which for some reason came in a much smaller bowl, almost like a little teacup. And because I love having rice with my soup, I actually went ahead and asked the flight attendant if she could get me a small bowl of rice. She looked at me a little bit funny and said she could check if they had extra servings of rice. Thankfully, they did. So I was able to have my vegetable soup with a small bowl of rice. And I think between the corn soup and the vegetable soup, if anyone cares, the corn soup was definitely better. The vegetable soup is a little bit lighter though, so depending on what your preference is, you can pick and choose, or you can be like me and just have both. So pretty soon our flight was coming to an end, which meant it was time for our last meal. I got the Japanese cuisine again, which was this on our flight. It wasn't as elaborate as the first meal, so everything was actually served together all at once, but the quality was still fantastic, and it was a great way to end our first experience flying ANA business class. The only other thing I forgot to mention is that ANA offers pajamas for business class passengers only upon request. And I kind of regret not asking for them, but Victor did, and they're actually very, very comfortable. I wear them as my pajamas at home now. So I would definitely recommend requesting their PJs. So now let's talk about how much we paid. Again, I do think we got lucky with business class award availability because Japan hadn't opened officially to tourists just yet. Normally, ANA business class seats are quite hard to find. And if you redeem through ANA, most of the availability is actually waitlisted. So you might not find out if you actually got the seat until right before your trip. In our case, we actually found last minute award availability through Aeroplan. So we paid 75,000 Aeroplan points and paid an additional 46 Canadian dollars each way. And 46 Canadian dollars is roughly the equivalent of about $35 US dollars per person. So again, that's 75,000 Aeroplan points, 35 US dollar per person one way. If I compare that to the redemption rates on ANA, you can see here that when I plugged in dates for October, it costs 85,000 miles and 620 US dollars for round trip. So one way that's about 42,500 miles and 310 US dollars. So really, really good deal. I think when we booked last year, ANA also had availability, but I didn't want to spend $1,200 out of pocket for both of us round trip. So I went ahead and booked through Aeroplan, even though it technically costs more in points. But if you think about it, I think normally this flight is 5,000 to 6,000 US dollars one way. So even with redeeming through Aeroplan, you're getting a value of about 7 cents per point, which is amazing given that I think like Amex points, for example, which is where we transferred from, those points are typically valued around 1.8 to 2 cents per point. So as long as you're getting that or above, I think it's a great deal. So that's also why we were okay with spending slightly more in points on Aeroplan versus ANA. But yeah, that is pretty much it. Hope this video was helpful. And if you do have any questions or even video requests, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And yeah, thanks so much for watching.